Hi class, welcome to the last exercise for the G-Class Builders. In this exercise we're going to go from the database to the page. We're going to query the database and figure out how to get the stuff that's in the query onto the page. And this will complete the cycle of what you've done in the class. Remember, you started from designing a user experience and doing some sketches, to testing that experience, to designing your main kind of information, which is events, putting those events in an event table in the database, getting it out of the database last week with queries, and this week getting the stuff that you've gotten out of the database with queries onto the web page. All right, let's get started. What we're trying to do today is build the events page. Now, if you were doing this without databases and all that, you would just go directly and start building events pages. But we know that in a bigger system, there's no way that you can actually go in and type the HTML for every events page. So what do you have to do instead? You save all your information in an events database, you pull it out of the events database, and then for any particular event, you build a specific page. All right, as usual, we're going to go through a series of steps. You're going to turn your original design, your design for your events page, into HTML. We're going to strip all the content out of your design, and then we're going to turn that design into a template. That might not mean a lot to you right now, but you'll see by the end of this, by the end of our talk, and especially by the end of today, what each of those things means. All right, as usual, download the template file, follow the instructions exactly in G-Class. There's a lot of more information than I'll give you in this slideshow in G-Class, and then upload the filled-in version to get your final evaluation. All right, let's start with the idea of how you bring things from a database to a page. You have a database of things to do, your events, and you want to, and you want to get that on a web page. So how does that happen? In general, in the outside world, here's how it happens. There's a program. Some program that queries the database and builds pages. So we'll call that program, something. And it's not part of what you have to do in this class. There's no programming involved in this class, but you have to realize that when you do this in the real world, there's lots of programming involved, and that's the first job of the program, to query the database, run those queries that you've been designing, and then somehow figure out from that query how to build a particular page. Notice that the page here is a very specific page. There's an event called Ender's Game, and that Ender's Game event is on this page, as well as there's an alphabetical index of all the events in the system. So those two areas, Ender's Game over here and things to do alphabetically over here, are built. So any particular page is going to have a different set of content over here. Okay, so a database. The program that queries the database and builds the page, and then templates that say what the page should look like. The program uses the template to decide where do things go and how do they lay out and what's the look and feel. Templates are the way that we're able to build multiple pages from the same look and feel. The template is a blank. It has spaces where all the information from the database goes, and so each time we have a different event, we use the same template, the same blank, but we fill it in with different information. Okay, one more thing I have to cover. Now this is kind of difficult, and many of you may not actually get this, but I want to present this because it's important information, and if you are ready to hear this information, then it will fill in some gaps for you that may have been missing in your entire career of using the web. So I want you to pay attention to this, but I also want you to know that this is a little bit beyond the scope of the class. So I'm saying this for the people who are ready to hear it. And if you're not quite ready to hear this, you're not quite ready to take this information in, don't worry about it. It won't really figure into the exercise that we're doing today. What I want to cover is what happens when you click on a web page, and how does that click result in a new web page being displayed. So let's start in the browser. There's a screen. The screen has a banner, some sort of navigation, some sort of content, and you make a click. Let's say you clicked on a button or a link that will display a new event screen. What happens? Well, the browser talks to the server, and particularly if you clicked on something that said, here's a link, ahref event page.php question mark event ID equals 1, and that was the link that you clicked on. recall that if you click on this link, you're going to see underlined words that say Ender's Game Movie, and when you click on the Ender's Game Movie link, this is the web page that's going to be called. It's called eventpage.php. Now, it's no usual web page. In fact, it's a program. So what happens next is the program eventpage.php is going to be sent some values. So the program is event.php, and the event ID here is 1. Don't worry that it says event ID in one place and thing ID in the other place. That's just a bug on the slide. So it'll send the value of event ID equals 1 to the program. Now you can maybe already anticipate what the program's going to do. It's going to use event ID equals 1 to find the right value in the database, to find the right record in the database. And in fact, that's what happens. Thing.php gets those values and it queries the database. Give me all the records, all the event records where the event ID is 1. Then we're going to load the template, and we're going to combine the results of the template with what we found from the database in order to build a page. So let me take us back from the beginning all the way up to this point. You click on something in the browser, and what you clicked on is shown at the bottom of the screen. It's a link, and the link says Ender's Game Movie, but what the link does is it calls this program event page PHP, and it passes it an event ID. Thing page PHP gets the event ID, queries the database using that event ID, loads the appropriate template, and combines the results from the database, the data, with the template, which is the blank, and that's what creates the page. Okay, so here's sort of a sketch of the HTML that Thing PHP is going to create. By the way, the server talks back to the browser. In general, that's what's happening. The browser, you click, it talks to the server makes some response, talks back to the browser, and gives you a new page. In this case, excuse me, that new page is going to have the header, it's going to have the navigation, and it's going to have the content template. That's the event. So this is the general idea of what happens when you click. Click sends a command to the server. In this case, the command is open up the event page PHP program and send it the event ID. Event page PHP knows what to do with that. It knows that it gets values out of the database. It gets the values from the server, queries the database, loads a template, combines the results of the query with the template, and that's what builds your next page. Okay, final piece of information here. Exactly how does that server build that page? So we've gotten the general idea that the server combines information from the database with information from the template, but let's now look in more detail about that. So we start with the database. This is a database not unlike the one that you have. It has an event table with a few events in it and has a location table with a couple of different locations in it. And you'll remember from before that we have a location of 1, and that corresponds to 123 Magnolia. And then down at the Seattle wheel, we have a location of 2. That corresponds to 231 Alaska Way. So there's our database. Here's our program. As we said, the program gets the values, loads the template, queries the database, and combines them. And there's the database right there. And here is kind of a sketch out of the HTML. But we can do better than sketching out the HTML. We can actually show some HTML that we want to create. So there's the header, and notice that the header doesn't really have anything from the database in it. We call that static. It's not going to change no matter what the information of the database is. On the other hand, this area that has the things to do alphabetically, that's an alphabetical list of events, does have data. Notice Ender's Game the movie, Intergalactic the movie, Seattle Wheel the ride. That's all data from the database. And in fact, packed into each of these links, as you saw before, is also the ID of the movie, because when you click on one of those, that cycle that I showed you is going to happen. I click on one of those links, sends the event ID, Ender's Game ID, or Intergalactic ID to the server. Server builds the next page. That's how we move forward. Every time you click on something, it sends different information to the server, and the server then responds by building a new page that has the information that you asked for on it. So here's that little navigation area, and it really has to query the location table in order to do what it needs to do. In fact, it has to find all of the records from the location, or sorry, in this case the event table, has to find all the records in the event table, has to sort them alphabetically, and then return that result and combine it with the template. Okay, let's look at the area that has the actual event in it. Here's Ender's Game. Notice that the Ender's Game needs a query that has to get things out of the event table as well as getting things out of the location table. So the event table supplies information about what, where, and when, and the location table supplies information about where. All right, so now we're ready to get on to the exercise, and you're going to create your own template that says what queries you're going to need to get information out of your database and what template you're going to need in order to place them on the page. Notice the two things that we're talking about here. Queries retrieve information from the database. The template says where to put that information on the page. The thing we won't deal with is the program that combines those two together. Okay, before we do that, let me just give you a little side note about page building. The way that I presented page building to you is really kind of old school. In the old days, we used to do all the work on the server. The server would run programs and combine data and templates together. In new school, the new days, a lot of that work is done in the browser. And so I tell you that because I don't want to give you the false impression that this is the state of the art. I give it to you because it's a simpler explanation of what happens. However, for us it doesn't really matter because we're not dealing with the program. If we were dealing with the program, it would matter to us whether the program ran on the server or if it ran in the browser. But it really doesn't matter to us because we're not dealing with the program. The process is exactly the same. A program runs somewhere on the server in the browser. It gets information from the database, it gets the template, and it puts those two together to build a page. So for us, it doesn't matter that we're using an old school technique. All right, step one, turn your design into HTML. Now, different students are at different stages of the development of their design. I would encourage you to take the design that you created earlier on, the prototype design, and turn that into HTML. But I realize that that might be too far to go for you. So if you don't want to do that, you can start from our content and make believe that it's your design. So we've already given you sort of the design with a little bit of CSS in it. I encourage you to mess with that, at least at most create your own design that you like way better than our design. But if you're not ready to do that, you're more than welcome to use our design and to start from our files. So here's our design. And this is one filled in event page. This is what we've been looking at for a while here. So we have an event page, and the event page has an alphabetical list of events: Ender's Game, Intergalactic, and Seattle Wheel, and the details of one event on the page. So this is the same page we've been looking at all along, but now we're going to turn this filled in page, this typed in page, into a template step by step. So here's the file that's finished. This is sort of, we would call this an HTML prototype. It has everything that we think is going to be on the page, but it's been typed in. It hasn't come from the database at this point. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to strip the content out of the design. We built a page, we created an HTML page, and now we're going to get rid of all the content because instead of being typed in, it has to come from the database. So here's what it looks like when it's been stripped out. All the particular content is out of there, and I just left a little bit of a placeholder here because if I put, because I want to make sure that there's something in this div. Okay, so here's our blank event page, and now we're going to turn that design into a template. So first step is only design, has nothing to do with building the page, where you create one page that has everything on it. Second stage is pretty easy. It's just getting rid of all the particulars and leaving behind the what isn't particular. Now I'm going to turn that design into a template. So here are my tools for doing that. I have 3 tools, and in the real world there's many more tools, but I'm just going to give you 3 to keep it simple. First one is queries, which you already know about. Queries are what get the data from the database. We use select, from, where, and order by in order to get the appropriate information out of the database. Second is this thing I've invented called table.column, table.column, and that fills in data on the page. Any place you want to put a piece of data from the database on the page, you can just use this little code. And the code says event.name in square brackets, for example, and that will put the event name right there on the page, or event.date. That will put the event date right on the page. So you can see that with just this one tool, table.column, you can do a whole lot of work. In fact, most of the work that you do is simply going to say, where does that piece of data, the event name or the event date, where does it go on the page? I want to put a little placeholder there so that the program knows where to put it in. There's only one other tool that I'll give you, and that's the begin loop and the end loop. Sometimes you need to do the same operation over and over again for every row. For example, when we're creating the alphabetical index, I want the name of every event. I don't just want one event name, I want every event name. So we're going to use this begin loop and end loop to repeat the same fill-ins, the same event.name or whatever, for each row that the query finds. So it's much easier for me to demonstrate that than to explain it, so I'll leave that alone for a moment, and we'll come back to it. The last thing I want to tell you is that the links are a little tricky because they look strange, but once I unpack them for you, I think you'll be able to deal with them. All right, let's take a look at our event template. This is what our event template looks like, and it has all of those little placeholders in it. Notice it has event.name here, it has event.name here, event.type, event.date, event.price. Now when you do yours, you may not have price or event date or whatever. You have your own data that you've designed over the course of the quarter, and if you use our template, don't use our column names, use your column names. Take this and make it your own. You already have data. You already actually also have pretty much all the queries you need in order to do this. So use your queries, use your column names, not ours. Okay, so I have two areas that are of focus here, things to do alphabetically and the event detail area. Notice that I put little queries under here, but I'll repeat those right now. In order to build that event name, the event details area right here, this is the kind of query that I need. Select star. You'll remember that star gives me everything from the event and the location table, where the event ID equals event 1. That's the query. And you've seen this query before. We've been working with this query actually for a couple of weeks now. So select everything. That's what select star means. From the event and the location table, where the event ID equals event 1. That will give me event 1. And in fact, it'll give me everything about event 1. Once I have everything about event 1, I can begin to fill this stuff in. Event type, event date, event price, etc. Location, all the different location data. Okay, the query on the other side is a little bit different. In this case, I don't want a single event record. I want all the event records. And in fact, I really only need the name and ID. I'll tell you why I need the name and ID in a moment. Obviously, I need the name, Ender's Game or Intergalactic the movie, whatever. And I'm getting it from the event table. And I'm going to order it by the name because I want an alphabetical list. I want these things alphabetically sorted. So whereas the query for the detail area gets one event and everything about it, the query for the alphabetical list gets only a little bit of information about every item, every event, but puts them in a separate order and gets every event. Okay, so back over here in the details, these are all columns from the event table, and these are all columns from the location table. Notice the event ones say event dot, and the location ones say location dot. Over here, the event name here, I'm going to expand a little bit and tell you exactly what really goes in there. And this is the part I was telling you about the links. The links are a little bit harder to code, but excuse me, if you use this general form and just realize that the event ID goes in here inside the quotes of the href, and the event name goes between the open A tag and the close A tag, then you won't go wrong. So you can pretty much use my typing here to do yours, and just make sure that you use your column names. If you have something other than ID, which I don't think you will, then you won't need, then put yours in. If you have something other than event name here, then put yours in. So in general, you can follow pretty closely what we do here and just make sure that where your names vary, you use your names, not ours. And where your columns vary, don't say that you're going to find an event type column if you don't have an event type. Say you're going to find an event something else column because that's what you have. Okay, so what I've done just now is I've showed you how to unpack that link. And really the key pieces of information are that it has an ID and it has a name, and that's really all you need to do in order to build this alphabetical list of this alphabetical list of links to events. Notice the ID goes in the event ID parameter, the event ID part of the href, and the event name goes between the open and close tags of the A. Okay, now let's finally talk about this loop. I want to put in a link for every event. That means I need to have this href tag, the ahref tag, repeating over and over again. So I have to put it in a loop. And I'm going to do that loop for every record, for every row that my query returns. Now remember, I wrote a query that returns every row in the event table. Therefore, I will get every row in the event table in this loop. Therefore, I will get the name of every event, and I've ordered that query by name, so it'll be an alphabetical list of the names of all the events, but there'll be links, not just names. Okay, this is a little tough, and many of you may be already sort of scratching your head and are kind of lost. Hear me out till the end, and then give it a try yourself, and if you have issues or questions, you can work with your TA on it. Okay, let me review what's going on here. We have the event area. It says thing to do here. I apologize for the word. It used to be called thing to do in a past class, and obviously some of those thing to do's have stuck around. So anytime you see thing to do, you can just say, oh, that's an event. We have the event area, and this is what the event area looks like. Notice I have some words in here that are going to repeat over and over again. The what, the where, the how much, and the what, the when, the how much, and the where are always going to be the same, but the event type could be different. The event date could be different, the event price could be different, and the location could be different. So here's my little query: select star from event from event and location where the event ID equals event 1. And now I'm going to fill that in with this query. I also have the navigation area, and that navigation area uses this query, which we've talked about before, and it uses this query to loop through and repeat this ahref over and over and over again, each time with a different event ID and a different event name. Okay, we're almost there. Let me just summarize what you're going to do in this entire exercise. Start from your page design or from ours. I encourage you to use your own page design, but if you're not comfortable doing that, you're welcome to use ours. But if you use ours, make it your own. Change all of the names there to the names that you're using. Even play around with the design a little bit so it accommodates your kind of information as opposed to the one that we put in ours. The next thing you do is turn that design into a template. Strip it free of all the content. Create an event area where all your event information goes. Create a navigation area. By the way, if you use your own design, make sure that you also include a navigation area in yours. And then figure out your queries. I think most of these queries are really close to the queries we've studied before, so there shouldn't be all that much work to do to figure out which query fills which area. Use your table.column, use your begin and end loop in order to fill in information from the database. That's what table.column does, and to loop through all the links in your navigation area. And again, those links are tricky, so look at what we did and follow our lead. Okay, that's it. That's a hard one, and you may have trouble getting to the end of it, and especially if you're new to HTML or you're not particularly a techie kind of person, bear with it, give it a try, and if you don't understand the how-to, at least understand the what is going on here. The what is that all of my event information is in a database. I got to get it out of the database using a query, and I use these templates, which are blank pages, to fill in all the information for a particular event. Okay, that's it. We're done with the builders.